Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. This episode is part of our special summer series called Leaving Home Stories, in which writers from the Habit membership will read personal narratives on the theme of leaving home, literally or metaphorically, temporarily or permanently. The writers workshop these stories in a recent class within the Habit membership. Today we'll be hearing from Beth Matheson, Jamie Vanbiber, and Greg Finley. I was able to catch up with each of these writers at the Habit's Summer Writers Weekend to discuss their writing. You'll hear snippets from those conversations after each story. Our first leaving home story this week comes from Beth Matheson. Beth has moved more times than anybody I know, all by the time she was 18. But even when you leave a house behind, you don't necessarily leave behind the stories of that house. Beth Matheson has been a Habit member for a year and a half. She is also a co-leader of the creative nonfiction group in the Habit's writer development cohorts. And now, 50 Houses, 37 Keys by Beth Matheson.
50 Houses, 37 Keys. I moved 50 times before I turned 18. 50 homes, 50 bedrooms, 50 neat fracture lines dividing my childhood into increments of weeks and months. Maybe that's why I can remember when and where almost everything happened. I have no memories of my first house, but I do remember the second. Or rather, I remember the end of the second. I can still see the line of fire trucks that wailed up to our apartment at Fort Belvoir Army Base after a disgruntled soldier torched a mattress in the basement. My dad says I was a year and a half old. After the fire, we moved in with friends until my dad was transferred to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. That's where I learned that when my mom said not to color on the wall, she meant the refrigerator as well. I also learned not to pet a hot stove coil, no matter how prettily it glowed, or stick a butter knife in a wall socket, no matter how well it fit. I survived, and we moved to Cleveland the day I turned 3. Our first neighbors in Cleveland had just emigrated from Korea. I spent hours next door every day with my new friends, Seta and Seisha, eating pajun with kimchi, mimicking their speech until I had learned enough Korean to follow the stories they made up about their baby dolls. I didn't have a baby doll of my own, but they lent me one so I could join the fun. For years after we moved again, I referred to Seta and Seisha as my best friends. Home number 6 was a top-floor apartment in an aging Tudor-style house at the edge of a forgotten neighborhood near the VA hospital where my dad worked. The neglected backyard sulked against the fence that separated us from a bar that never slept. I loved the music that pulsed through the fence. I learned all the lyrics and taught them to my 2-year-old sister, including ones that made my mom squint and cover her smile. She would force her lips into a serious line and say that people might understand us better if we used a word like bottom to describe that part of the body. That's the house where we had enough toys to fill a whole box. Someone gave us a Fisher-Price barn, an airplane with a set of Weeble passengers, a few used stuffed animals, and some Holly Hobby color forms. For Christmas, I got a baby doll with silky brown curls and eyes that opened and closed. I named her Laura. For my 5th birthday, my parents gave me the best toy I could imagine, a Magnus Cord miniature electric organ. It was 37 keys of pure wind-powered magic, complete with 12 buttons that played entire chords. The cracked right panel added its own miraculous buzz. Every day I knelt in front of that organ, placed my left index finger on middle C, and turned the knob to start the fan. The note would start as a whisper and a crescendo like the climax of a great symphonic masterpiece until I could barely stand the glory. Then I would hold it for 1 second longer, just to feel myself almost burst. I taught myself how to play Chariots of Fire within a few weeks. My left thumb thumped the bass rhythm, my right hand played the melody, and my mind filled in the orchestral flourishes and dramatic setting. Soon I was capturing melodies that bubbled out of my heart. Mournful dirges, tearful capers, and stormy cacophonies came to life and took over my room. When I played, I felt like I was where I belonged. Just after I started kindergarten, my dad learned that the Army planned to transfer him to Belgium. That was too far away, my mom said. So they decided to leave the transience of military life and become missionaries to Asia instead. I'm not sure how my mom convinced my dad to pack up my beloved organ and cart it all the way to Duncanville, Texas in the back of our van, but I might not have gone with them if it hadn't come too. The organ lived under the desk in our dorm room through several months of missionary school. I often hunched under the desk like a tiny troll in a cave, playing ominous chords to scare my sister. I also taught myself how to play chopsticks during those months, much to my parents' pretended delight. When training ended, the organ came with us to our next home, a single-wide trailer on a mission base in North Carolina. Maybe my dad was tired of lugging my cumbersome friend all over the country, or maybe I'd played one too many renditions of chopsticks. Whatever his reason was, I couldn't understand when he decided the mission base was the organ's final destination. I howled. I sobbed. I begged. And then I turned the knob one more time, let the swell of a chord wash over me, and hugged my organ goodbye. I hid while my dad loaded it into the van and drove off toward the Missionary Donation Center. 5 more houses and 2 cross-country trips later, I left my Laura doll with my grandmother for safekeeping during our first term in the Philippines. My grandmother, who was convinced we were all going to die overseas, promptly gave Laura and all our other belongings to a family who had just lost everything in a fire. Eventually, new friends and tropical adventures pushed aside the ache of the biggest griefs my little heart had known. I had new toys, Legos, Barbies, and a plush dog creatively named Doggy, and a knockoff Cabbage Patch with no name at all. I even took 2 years of lessons on a real piano until I quit because my teacher wouldn't let me play notes that weren't on the page. In the Philippines, we still moved every few months. My parents decided not to purchase a house on the mission center, so we rented other missionaries' houses while they traveled. In house number 23, the sewage backed up into the living room, so my parents and baby brother moved unannounced while my sister and I were at school. We found them eventually. In house number 25, my sister and I made a game of trying to catch the 4-foot-long monitor lizard that had made its home inside the living room wall. We would take hold of the tail dangling from between wall panels and try to drag it out backwards, but it wouldn't budge. Shortly after a house guest woke up with the lizard staring into her eyes from its perch on her chest, we moved again. In house 26, we had a tailless tomcat named Garfield, and in house 27, we learned how to kill bats with a tennis racket. In house 28, I tossed a foam mattress out a second-floor window so my sister, our friends, and I could try to fly without breaking a leg. By the 35th house, we had matured into more practical forms of entertainment, like tobogganing on a mattress down a waxed wood staircase into friends who waited at the bottom like human bowling pins. House 39 had no electricity or indoor plumbing, but we didn't mind. Every day we joined a herd of semi-domesticated water buffalo at a spring that dribbled from the mountainside, and slowly filled several 5-gallon buckets to haul home. Every night we listened to gospel quartets on a battery-powered tape recorder while playing cards by the flickering light of a kerosene lantern. Every house gave me stories, and stories can't be left behind. We left the Philippines when I was 14 for an even wilder foreign country, the greater Cincinnati area. There in houses 43 through 46, I remembered why walking barefoot in the snow is a bad idea. And I learned I had to hide my stories to make new friends. In houses number 47 through 49, I did my homework, made good grades, took care of my siblings while my parents worked, and tried to look like a normal American teenager. But it's hard to be normal when you've lived in 4 dozen homes. Just before my senior year of high school, we moved into house number 50, a modest rental on a quiet acre in rural North Carolina. By the time we moved out 2.5 years later, I had met a boy. I married that boy, a fellow missionary kid, because he has stories too. For almost 30 years, we've been helping each other unpack all the stories we've carried from house to house, across states and around the world. Recently, we discovered a story we share. Late one night, at an hour when pillows and darkness coaxed timid memories from hiding, I told my husband about the loss of my Magnus Chord organ. He grew so quiet I thought he had fallen asleep. Your dad took it to the donation center at the mission base? He broke the silence, his voice thick. It had 37 keys, right? Did it have a crack across the right panel? Now I was quiet. Not long after I had left my organ, it had found a home with the person I would come to love the most. There in the dark, he told me of the simple tunes he taught himself to play. He told me how he would place one finger on middle C and turn the knob to hear the swell of the note until he felt like he might burst. We don't know where the organ ended up, but we have a piano now. Our youngest daughter, the one with silky brown hair, sits for hours and plays more notes than are on the page. Her music comes to life and takes over the room. And I'm where I belong.
Beth Matheson, it's hard to believe that you actually lived in 50 houses before you turned how old?
I was 18 when I moved into the 50th house.
So at one point you say something along the lines of, at each house you've collected stories and stories came with them. So you left all these houses behind, but you didn't leave the stories behind.
Right.
How did that shape you as a writer and a teller of stories?
I don't think I really knew the impact that the stories had on my life until I really kind of started processing things as an adult. Uh-huh. Once I had my own kids and I realized, well, how unusual, how weird my childhood was. When I even had other missionary families, people that grew up as missionary kids look at me and go, wait, what?
Yeah.
How many houses did you live in? You had what happen? I started processing all of that, and the only way that I really knew how to process it was in writing. Uh-huh. And as I began to write those stories, I realized that it gave me a sense of safety.
To tell the stories?
To tell the stories that I didn't expect. Huh. That it was almost like normalizing them for myself. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, this really did happen. And yes, this really is part of your story. And that's good. This is, mm-hmm. These are good stories. That not all of them are pleasant stories, but they all formed me in ways that I know I would not be who I am mm-hmm. without the stories that formed me through my childhood.
You said these are all good stories. What's a good story?
A good story is a story that brings good. It's not necessarily a story that's fun to hear or fun to tell. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the stories that I have are not real fun. But stories that form us and show us who God is and how the world works and how people work mm-hmm. are good stories.
Yeah. Pretty unbelievable twist at the end of that story.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah, we were it was night, so I couldn't see my husband's jaw on the floor, but I could hear it in his voice. And we both laid there going, really? Really? Like, we could not have engineered that.
Yeah.
And we've actually gone back and tried to find that organ to see if we could figure out who it was donated to after that. And we haven't been able to find it, but we've got a shared story, and that's a really precious thing for people that were really highly mobile as kids.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing that sort of reminds us of is what a surprising world we live in.
Yeah. That
reality is surprising, and we think of reality as being, I don't know, predictable. When we tell people, be real, what we're saying is submit to the predictable.
Yeah.
And yet, as your story demonstrates, there's something about reality that is pretty surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, the best stories are ones that we could not have created on our own.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing this one with us, Beth.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Our second story comes from Jamie Vanbiber. Jamie joined the Habit membership during COVID. She and various sisters and nieces have been a vital part of the community ever since. The story you're about to hear sounds like something from a sitcom, but Jamie assures me it's true. I think you're going to love Jamie Vanbiber's story, Fashioned to Die For.
It was 1987, and I was a 22-year-old novice at life with skinny legs. I had been married 6 months and still had a semester of college. I felt my inexperience among the other women at our new church who could throw dinner parties on bone china. I was trying to find my place in this new society when after church one Sunday, as people were mingling around, I heard my name called. I turned around and it was one of the pastor's teenage daughters, Candy. The pastor's family held much clout, so to have her call my name was exciting. "Jamie, can you come to a clothes showing at our house today? My sister has started a new business since her divorce. It's at 2:00. By George, I was invited to the pastor's house. As the hour drew near, I was sitting on my husband's lap on our garage sale couch in the small den of our rent house. We had just finished lunch of ham and cheese sandwiches and were enjoying the breeze of the air conditioning window unit. "Greg, what do you think I should wear to a clothes showing?" I tried to act nonchalant and not reveal my nerves. I didn't want him to know I was feeling insecure about the whole thing. "What's a clothes showing?" he asked. I don't know exactly. Candy's sister is selling a line of clothes. I guess I'll wear shorts since it's so hot outside. I'll wear my nice red ones. As I turned my old Toyota Tercel into Candy's neighborhood, Concord Estates, I realized I had forgotten to bring the address. A little panic rose as I was already running late. I would have to go on memory from having written it down. I recognized the street name, Conestoga, and made the left turn down the oak-laden avenue. "Now, which house?" I whined. To my relief, I saw cars parked in front of one of the homes. As I pulled up, 2 people were just getting out of one of the cars. I parked and got out as quickly as I could so I could walk in with them. Arriving alone felt daunting. I hurried up the front walk behind a man and woman and noticed that they were dressed up. The man wore a suit and the woman a dress with heels. Dang, I thought. I'm underdressed. And I didn't know men go to clothes showings. I joined them at the door as the gentleman pushed the doorbell. They smiled reservedly at me. As we waited, I felt sweat drops forming on my upper lip. The woman said, "We're Marion and Robert Harriman." "Oh, I'm Jamie Vanbiber," I said, putting on a charming smile. "How do you know her?" asked Karen. "I know her sister," I said. The door opened and my mouth dropped when I saw a butler in a uniform. He bowed his head and without words led us through a marble foyer. The dressy man and woman walked behind him as if they had followed a butler all their lives. There was a stillness in the house. Thoughts were racing through my mind. What have I gotten myself into? I'm so stupid. I'll never fit in. I hate my red shorts. Why didn't I bring Craig? We were following the butler down a long hall. I could hear their heavy heels and my lightweight sandals on the floor. The hall made a turn to the left, to the right, and eventually to the left again. We were going into the bowels of a large house. Finally, the butler opened a door and stepped aside. The woman walked through the door, and the man turned to me and waved his hand as if to say, "Ladies first." I wanted to say, "No, you first," but I smiled a polite smile and walked in. I found myself in a darkish, musty-smelling room with plush carpet. I darted my eyes hither and thither to the closed, heavy drapes, the few others standing in quiet huddles, but no Candy. Before I realized what was happening, a priest, white collar at attention, was telling the handful of us to come over to the bedside of an old woman. She lay there with her white hair and ashen face, very still, with closed eyes. This was no clothes showing. I had fallen into a deathbed scene. I heard the door close behind with a thud that reeked of the lock of a dungeon. We were all lining the bed now. The priest welcomed us and began a litany of words of which I couldn't make out for the roar in my ears from my own heartbeat and the chaotic words racing through my mind. Lie? Pretend? Run? With each passing moment, I knew I was in deeper. Would they go around and ask for words to share about the woman? Could I fake my way through? What if I got put in her will? Excuse me, I butted in with a crazed tone, staring down at my prayer hands. The priest halted, and I felt all eyes on me. I didn't look up. I just said, I think I'm in the wrong house. I turned and found the door wasn't locked after all. I yanked it open and got out of the bedroom. I closed the door behind me, hoping to stop anyone from chasing me like in the movies. I ran back down the maze of hallway, my sandals slapping the floor. I was terrified of either running into the butler or getting lost and sucked into the vortex of this place, eventually having to face a real person again. But I suddenly saw the front door. I slapped through the marble foyer, got through the door onto the porch. I wanted to hide or die as quickly as possible, preferably die, because I couldn't face anyone knowing about this. From the porch, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of two women from church walking up the sidewalk at the house next door. They were in shorts. I hid behind a column, hoping not to be seen so as not to have to explain. When they were out of sight, I bounded like a scared rabbit across the two lawns, hunched over like that would make me invisible. I got to their stoop, my heart racing as I knocked on the door. It opened, and there stood Candy, her face lighting up when she saw me. She looked so normal and natural. I, on the other hand, wanted to fall on her neck and thank her for finding me and to kiss the ground of her foyer. But I faked my way through, acting overly calm and mature, meeting her mother and sister like I was the queen herself, though a manic version, smiling with all my teeth and shaking hands vigorously. I tried on clothes in a makeshift dressing room, my hands still shaking, and gawked at the price tags. How quickly one becomes a peasant. I did the unpleasant task of confessing I couldn't buy anything, but thank you so much. I was glad to leave, but nervous about running into someone from next door. I looked around, and the coast being clear, I loped through the blazing heat to my car. As the door slammed, enclosing me as in a cocoon, I put my head on the steering wheel and exhaled. Life as a grown-up felt precarious. I hurried and put my key in the ignition and got the heck out of Dodge. Though I promised myself all the way home I would never tell a soul, at home I spilled everything to Craig, the shame I felt receding as we laughed till we cried.
Jamie Vanbiber, that story was just so funny. I have to ask the question, I'm sorry. Are you sure this is true?
Yes, it is true.
Okay, tell me how the story itself, tell me the circumstances in which you wrote. I think you wrote it for one of the habit classes?
Yes.
First time I heard it was at the Focus Retreat.
Yes, just in March.
In March. But you wrote it a while before that.
Yes, I think I dug it up for the Focus Retreat, but it was just about a year ago that I wrote it for one of the classes.
Yeah.
So,
do you remember what the assignment was? What the prompt was?
I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember.
And you went digging around in your memory.
Uh-huh. I dug around and I talked to my husband just to check it out. Like, is this what you remember?
Is this not a story that you tell at every dinner party?
Yes, I do. I've told it a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But just so to make it more, if you're reading it, you need it to really flow well. Mm-hmm. So I had to be careful. I didn't want to add anything that wasn't real. So I, as I wrote it as a flowing story, I made sure every sentence was, I mean, occasionally I might have to, I had to make up the street name.
Okay.
I looked up some street names in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Because I did remember that it was in Concord Estates. Because that was kind of a fancy neighborhood that some of my school friends lived in and I didn't. So I looked up some street names online for Concord Estates and found
So this is an anecdote in your regular rotation, but there's a difference between an anecdote and a story.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience of that difference. I mean, you said you're trying to make sure it's true, which I assume you're doing it in the anecdote form too, but what else?
Not necessarily.
Okay, all right.
You can stretch things when you're telling a story to family or friends. But it was fun to realize, my gosh, this thing is really true. This thing, the crazy details are all true.
Yeah.
Like the lady asking me, how did you know her? Oh my gosh. Well,
I love that story, and thank you for sharing it with us. And it didn't, properly speaking, fit the theme of leaving home.
Yes.
But I couldn't resist. So thanks for letting us.
I couldn't resist offering it as a possible, and I was hoping you might not be able to resist too. So.
Leaving home for college is a big transition for anybody. For Greg Finley, that transition was greatly complicated by a concatenation of events that you're about to hear for yourself in this episode's third and final leaving home story. Greg has worked and reworked multiple versions of this narrative in workshops, retreats, and classes within the Habit. Here in its latest iteration is Time for Me to Fly by Greg Finley.
Time for Me to Fly. We would not go to church on this particular Sunday morning, and that was unusual enough. But this breakfast, the biscuits weren't canned. A treat. The gravy was thick and savory with sausage. And on the table in front of me, there was even the Smucker's boysenberry syrup I liked for my pancakes. This was a farewell breakfast, but its lavishness was uncharacteristic for my family. And this made it feel more like a Last Supper. The whole thing terrified me. It should have been a happy occasion, but it wasn't. Gathered around the table were my parents, my brother and sister-in-law, and my two young nephews. They too enjoyed the food, but like me, they seemed to approach the morning not as if they were attending a celebration, but as if they were attending a funeral. I was leaving for college, or more specifically, I was leaving for college football preseason camp. College wouldn't start for 2 more weeks, but I had earned a scholarship to Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville to be a punter and kicker, and I was supposed to report later this afternoon. My mother kept a calendar on the wall in our kitchen. It hung next to our orange rotary phone, and on it she had a circled this date, August 12th, 1979, back in early February when I'd signed my NCAA letter of intent. The idea of leaving home generally had never appealed to me. I'm not sure if I was a mama's boy or a daddy's boy or a little of both. What I knew for sure was that I was a Grandview boy, which was the Missouri town I had grown up in. That community had shaped me since I came home from the hospital. It had formed me from kindergarten through my recent high school graduation. My desire to play football at the next level was only slightly more attractive to me than simply staying put for a few more years, or at least that's how it had felt until earlier this summer. Now I wasn't sure what was attractive. Nothing seemed to be, either in the staying or in the leaving. A lot had happened since I signed the letter of intent back in February. Then I had a healthy body and a healthy best friend who would be my roommate. That friend's name was Billy Burgess. and he had signed a letter of intent to play at Northwest on the same day that I had. Billy was a hard-hitting cornerback. In addition to punting and kicking, I had played tight end in high school. Northwest said I could play tight end there if I wanted to, but if I did, they weren't going to give me any more money. I reasoned that kicking and punting was a much less violent way to spend the afternoon at practice than having linebackers level me after catching a pass. This suited me fine anyway, because kicking and punting was what I wanted to do in the pros. The pros. A laughable dream, really, but one that had nagged at me almost since I was 4 years old watching my Kansas City Chiefs play in the first Super Bowl. Most everyone on our high school football team probably had some form of this goal, but the 10 or so of us that would play in college felt one step closer to it. This was true even for guys like me who weren't going to the big time, but instead were playing for colleges that had some sort of direction in their names. Billy and I, in particular, would share these dreams with each other. He had been likened to the Chiefs' hard-hitting safety Gary Barbaro. Many thought Billy could get to Barbaro's level if he progressed in college and put some muscle on his slight frame. Many of my coaches and teachers fueled my dream as well. One of my social studies teachers always greeted me in class with either a rousing thunderfoot or golden toe, which made me want to kick like the Chiefs' Jan Stenerud or punt like their Gerald Wilson. These greetings were subtle encouragements for me and fueled the dream casting that Billy and I would do while riding around Grandview in his parents' Buick Electra 225 or in my parents' 1966 Chevrolet Impala. Last February, we were one step closer to that dream. An NCAA national letter of intent, and a date certain to report to camp. But in the 6 months between February and this day in August, a lot had happened. Billy and I, along with our good friend Gary, had been in a serious automobile accident in late April. We had all survived, but at first this would not be apparent. In the aftermath of the crash, Gary and I had feared that Billy had died as he lay motionless in the front seat of Gary's smoldering Trans Am. It was only several hours later, after ambulance rides and emergency room triages, that we found out he'd be fine. We'd all be fine, sort of. In addition to other less serious injuries, I was left with a dislocated elbow and a severed thumb, which would require surgery. In the aftermath, I couldn't use my hands and arms until after high school graduation. For a while, it was unclear whether I'd be ready for the opening of Northwest Camp. It took me longer than I would have liked for my limbs to sufficiently heal in order to catch the requisite deep snap that had to happen before a punt. Billy, too, despite looking fine, was evidently not fine. At the hospital, he was treated for a concussion, kept overnight, then released. He couldn't immediately return to the baseball team, of which we had both been a part, but he was eventually cleared to play in a prestigious Kansas City area all-star football game between seniors from Missouri and seniors from Kansas. It was called the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Kansas City All-Star Game. I was not selected for the Missouri team, and this was a big blow to my ego. I sulked for a while after the team had been announced. I tried to be happy for Billy and my other Grandview teammates who'd been selected, but it took a while for me to be fully happy for them. The All-Star Game was to be held in late June, and a couple of weeks beforehand, the teams began practicing at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. Arrowhead was where the Chiefs played, and it would be the site of the game. One night during practice, Billy collapsed while performing a rather routine football drill. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors determined that something in his brain had ruptured. The result was massive swelling that eventually required a surgery to release the pressure on his skull. Shortly after the surgery, the neurologist reported that Billy was not registering brain activity. Friends, parents, and classmates held vigil over Billy in the hospital for the better part of 2 weeks. Finally, on a Sunday evening in late June, a nurse entered a large waiting room where dozens of us were gathered. We knew why she was there. She somberly announced that Billy had died. I was not a complete stranger to death. I had lost 3 grandparents and a handful of great aunts and uncles over the years, but they had all died when I was very young, more than 10 years earlier. During these funerals, I didn't really know what was going on. Now I understood very well what was going on, but I desperately wished I didn't. It was all so strange, all so sudden. The car wreck had been the worst thing that had happened to me in my life. I had survived it, had graduated from high school, and thought only 2 weeks earlier that I had overcome this great adversity and now would be able to rejoin the life that was in progress. I never dreamed it could have gotten worse, but it did. At his funeral a few days later, some of Billy's other close friends and I were his pallbearers. I suppose I was honored to be chosen for this role, but it didn't seem right. Pallbearers were supposed to be white-haired and black-suited men with solemn faces and pursed lips. They weren't supposed to be kids like us. Yes, we were all 18, could vote, be drafted, and even buy 3.2% beer in Kansas. But I did not feel like a man that day. I felt like a kid. I was a scared and confused little boy masquerading as a man as I attempted to perform a man's job. As we carried Billy's casket out of the back of the chapel after his funeral, we were filmed by the local television stations. Evidently, Billy's death was considered newsworthy in Kansas City due to its connection with the All-Star football game. I hated the media for filming us. The rest of the summer was a blur. My elbow and hand had healed enough to once again be on the school district's summer painting crew. And when July came, I assumed my kicking and punting regimen up at the high school football field. Even though I was doing these things, there didn't seem to be any satisfaction or joy in them. In rejoining these routines, something was missing. Something I couldn't name. There was no blueprint for handling the grief. It was a grief that was there, but one that I didn't think should be there. Or if it was there, it indicated I was weak and soft. Grief wasn't something that should last very long for a high school to college football player. It was not manly. Like being a pallbearer, I needed to cowboy up, rub some dirt on the wound, and get back in the game. The world seemed to be telling me I should take off the sackcloth and ashes, and if I couldn't, there was more wrong with me than even I had imagined. Of course, no one said any of these things explicitly. It was the things people didn't say that forced me to draw these conclusions. I could tell my parents felt bad for me, and they too were grieving in their own ways, as they were quite fond of Billy. Despite this, they really didn't speak much about Billy or ask me how I felt. There were no mental health checks or grief counselors. I felt on my own to figure things out. Finally, one evening in late July, I had an encounter that encouraged me in an unexpected way. Our high school football coach had left for a new head coaching job at a school in Kansas. The district had hired his replacement, and his name was Sam Brown. One night I was punting on Grandview's field when Coach Brown was conducting a summer camp up the hill on the school's practice field. When the team had finished, he came down to the game field where I was practicing. I recognized him from his picture in the paper and thought he was going to ask me to not kick and punt on the game field. Instead, he asked me if I was Greg Finley, and he introduced himself to me. He then asked me about Northwest Missouri State, and then told me he heard I was best friends and was going to room with Billy. And then he said things like, "That must be hard," and "This is sure tragic," and "What a shame you boys won't be able to play together at the next level." He then encouraged me to persevere. I was stunned. I couldn't believe he was talking about Billy and in a very real way acknowledging what I was feeling inside. I felt he was saying not only what I had been feeling was not bad, it was what should be expected. The situation was tragic. It was a shame we weren't going to be roommates and play together at Northwest. And yes, this was hard. I couldn't believe someone had words for what I'd been going through. Here was someone I didn't even know, and he had taken time to console me. I wasn't crazy after all. The Coach Brown encounter was liberating in so many ways, but eventually July turned to August, and Sunday the 12th now shouted at me with every phone call I took from the orange rotary phone. I couldn't say this to anyone, but I no longer wanted to go to Maryville. There were the Billy reasons, of course, but there were other factors that may have always been there but were obscured until Billy's death. I simply wanted to remain a child. Could I have a do-over and go back to kindergarten? Could I eke out another year of high school sports eligibility? After all, those juniors last year were good enough guys. If not, maybe the school district would just let me continue to paint their classrooms at night. It seemed that maybe I had loved the idea of playing football more than I had actually loved playing football. Maybe I had simply enjoyed the camaraderie, the fellowship, the idea of team more than I enjoyed the competition itself. After all, I never had that killer instinct that seeing the opponents suffer. Now I had to go to Maryville and meet and play with guys I didn't know. I would encounter dozens of players who had been and would continue to be better than me. They would also be cooler than me, no doubt. But I had to move forward. I had to go. There was no eject button I could push. Things had been set in motion back in February, and they couldn't be stopped or altered in August. I managed to extricate myself from the breakfast and put some final things in my Monte Carlo. It would be a 2-hour drive to Maryville, and I needed to get going as I was going to pick up my teammate Angelo Malone, who would also be playing at Northwest. My mother, as she would always do, thought of 1,000 things to ask me to keep me there a few more minutes. Did I forget this? Did I want to take some of that? I would have liked it if everyone would have just let me walk outside and leave. Instead, my parents, my brother, and his family escorted me out to my car. We hugged and cried and said our goodbyes until they finally released me to the Monte Carlo. They stared at me as I backed out of the driveway. I gave them a final wave, then popped in an 8-track tape of REO's Speedwagon. I pulled forward and toward the highway that would take me to Maryville. On a different day, REO's Time for Me to Fly would have been an appropriate anthem to usher me north on US 71 highway. But playing that song, like so many of my actions over the last few months, would have been a lie.
Greg Finley, thank you for letting us hear your story. I know you've been wrestling around with the story for a long time. I mean, just the writing of the story. You know, we've done a few workshops. You've run it through a few iterations of workshops within the Habit. Mm-hmm. Tell me about. I want to talk about the time lag between when these things happened and when you wrote about them. Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know, were you trying to make sense of these things, like in all the intervening however many years, how many decades this has been, or is this something you had to come back to later? How would you describe your relationship with these events?
Yeah, good question. There's a sadness in that. There were a lot of years I didn't really think about the story.
Yeah.
Didn't really think about my friend. And it was really I really didn't write very much for a lot of years. I had different careers in real estate and economic development and such. And it was a story, I never forgot my friend, never forgot Billy, but I started writing eventually, started doing some blogs. I did some sports blogs and then some blogs that were somewhat spiritual and dealt in memoir and dealt in sort of, it was called of the diaspora. And I started to write something about him. I actually wrote a blog post, and this would have been probably 10 or 12 years ago, so maybe some 35 years after these things happened. And it was on his birthday. I'd remembered his birthday, September 30th, and I was like, I'm going to honor him today by writing a blog post. I don't want people to forget my friend. So I did that, and it was all ready to publish, and I'm like, he needs more than that. He needs more than that. At the same time, I was writing some kind of funny stories that happened to me when I played college football. And I thought maybe these two stories are kind of related. And so maybe I honor him in a longer work, and I started to read memoirs at that point. I was reading more memoirs. And that's when I started, some 10, 12 years ago, saying, I think there's a longer work here, and let me see if I can figure this out. And then I realized when I started writing that, how much work I had to do, and that I never really grieved that.
Yeah.
And so I realized this is something that's going to take a while to unpack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, in this particular essay, it was good because I was writing sort of in narrative form and hadn't really combined, and in this 6 months that I talk about here is really it's just key thematically in the whole story, and how I not only process his death and all the things that led up to that automobile accident and so forth, but then just leaving home in general. It was like leaving home was going to be hard enough, and then I had all this other stuff going on inside my brain. So I realized 35, 40 years later, looking back, that I don't think you really grieved that properly. Yeah. And so in the writing of this, that's something I've tried to do.
Yeah. Well, just over the years, I've read several different iterations of this, and I know you've been really working hard to kind of figure out how to tell this story. And is this 2 stories? Is it 1 story? Is it 6 stories?
Right. That's a really good point, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out, because there's definitely an element for me that I want to honor Bill Burgess in this story. That has to be some aspect of this memoir. And I've asked myself, is that the entire story, really? And it may be. There's also this whole aftermath of that, of me processing that, and without giving too much away, I would end up not staying at that university very long, and didn't think I was going to play any football again. So I ended up doing that, but I don't know how much football helped in that process, I think. Yeah. But I probably couldn't have handled a lot of football failures if it hadn't been for his death.
Yeah, right. Well, it feels like even, a few years ago when you were working on this, it felt like football was your way in, and in the process, maybe you discovered that was just your way in. It wasn't necessarily what this whole thing was really about. Exactly. When I first looked at the football, the thing was funny. I played tight end in high school, but in college I was only a kicker and a punter, a specialist, as they would say. And what was odd is I'd never kicked a field goal in a real game, even though I'd had many extra points. So I really thought it was about kicking a field goal, kicking a field goal, which I didn't do until I was in college. And so it was, but then I'm like, I don't know if that's really what it's about. I wanted that, but after I got that, I don't think that was really what it was about. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you honored Billy in this piece, and so thanks for sharing it with us and letting us participate in it.
Thanks for letting me tell a little bit of the story. Hopefully I can bring it to completion.
Here's hoping.
Okay.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.